Start off our scaling stretch to anterior, middle, and posterior scaling. So there's a couple ways we can do this one. You can come right on in, and I will traction at the base of the occiput first to just lean back to get the spine as elongated as possible and relax to see how it adjusts. And take the ear straight over towards the shoulder, rotate that head and the neck towards the AC joint, hook your leg in. You're gonna need it. Draw that shoulder down, and boom, you can do a nice little scaling stretch. For the SCM, we would do this off the table. We would flip our client over, and before they slide down, I'll show you this a little bit later, but it's the same move except we're dangling the head off the table instead of just pulling over. But you can see we've got the jugular right there. Press on in, feel for that pulse, which I've got right here. Right here, barely right there. I can feel it deep. I feel it at the tip of my finger. And you can actually see robins too. Some people you're not going to be able to see that. So we know the anterior deltoid, the scalene lives in front of that brachial plexus, right? So we know that the carotid splits those. So from there, or not the carotid, the subclavian. Then we know right here, we have got middle scalene, posterior scalene going down to rib 2. So there's no involvement here, or really nothing you should be afraid of right here. So you know, 2 fingers, 1 more finger is danger zone, directly in front, you can get into the anterior. All about position and just making sure you're precise. Oh, shucks. And I'm gonna allow Robin to kind of come back a little bit out of that stretch just so we've got a good straight line to work with here. Now, you can do some MFR here. It would involve kind of cupping the clavicle, drawing the arm down, gently placing your fingers to stretch. Personally, I don't think it's worth your time. To be completely honest with you, stripping them works the best. So we're gonna put a little bit of lotion right on in through this line here. Making sure, yeah, I got some posterior scaling for sure. I'm gonna do that whole little triangle. Okay. Then, to perform deep stripping, we're gonna do each individual scalene 4 to 8 times in each line, avoiding the brachial plexus. And, that next one's fun. Okay, so I'm gonna start on the anterior. And because of that, I'm gonna hook my fingers in instead of using my thumb. So, clavicle, top of the sternum, SC joint, SCM, scalene anterior. So hooking your fingers directly in, light, firm, but gentle. We're gonna strip directly towards the clavicle, stopping at the clavicle. And this is not gonna be a lot of pressure at all.
You're just kind of like basically palpating a little heavier than you would normally palpate.
Yeah, it's more like firm palpation than it really is anything else.
And you do have to be working on that.
Yeah.
And so if you have somebody that is so tight that you can flick along those,
Like so.
how do you modify those techniques at all?
You
Like-
might
like
not.
if you
You
have
might not
trouble
do any
staying on-
rotation. You might have to actually like come here
Okay.
to be able to do
So
that
they
stripping.
don't engage so much.
Yeah.
Okay.
Start in a neutral position.
Relatively neutral. You want a little tension on it because as we work these, the head and neck naturally kind of soften and rotate
Okay.
over. In those instances of like really, really tight ones, yeah. So now that we've got anterior treated a little bit, if you feel any trigger points, you can stop and treat those. There's a little bit of tension right here, and you can actually, if you watch, see me flick over the anterior scalene, okay? So I'm gonna take my thumb and hook right on into that first rib. Have Robin take a good deep breath for me. And I'm gonna friction and lighten up immediately. So he takes another breath, and I'm gonna sink on back in. And the reason I am compressing and lightening up is if you're not precise and you're a little bit off, holding for half a second or 2 seconds is much better than holding for 30 seconds. So that's just the precautionary method. You should know where you're at, but in the event you don't, press on in, inhale, lighten up on that exhale, allow the blood flow to return. And this is, again, you shouldn't be compressing anything, but if you are, it's just extra safe. Now, put a little bit more lotion in here and move on back to the middle. And now I'm gonna switch.
So is that middle or posterior?
So the pressure isn't right here, it's right there. So it is middle.
Okay.
So basically just right underneath that carotid?
Just right,
Yeah.
right posterior to
You
it,
can
yes.
see his carotid just going.
And you definitely want to come all the way up here to those attachments along the spine too. So you should be feeling for those as you go down. But yeah, we are just immediately behind carotid and jugular as we go right on into that first rib. You would do this 6 to 8 times or 4 to 8 times, whatever the heck the piece of paper says, till the thing starts softening up really that's what you're looking for. Once the middle's good, move right on to posterior. And this one will get confusing because you've got trap right here and you've got the attachments for levator scapula kind of creeping forward. So making sure you've got good, you've already created some slack and trap, which is one I'm going to toss in right now, and levator. Just make sure I can access this.
Is it okay to just go ahead and treat a little bit of levator in that as you're treating that?
Oh yeah,
posterior?
oh yeah, definitely. This is part
As
of,
you say, it's kind of underneath those anyway, right? The
Yeah.
posterior?
and it's part of that treatment too. So when we flip our clients over for the trap day, we already treat this. So you should have some slack in there already. But if you can't, if you don't, then you'll just work it a little bit. Now I can take that and pin that thing back, create my angle in, sink on into posterior. And I'm gonna friction as I go through here. You doing okay pressure-wise? Find any trigger points, treat them. Then next, this is one of my favorite moves to do because it looks cool. You're gonna bring the neck back into neutral, or the chin's lined up at the sternum. Support the head and the neck, switch back to your thumb. Hook yourself in for this one. Compress on in. Don't move your thumb.
I love that.
Move on over. Finish that strip. Return on back. Press in. Glide. Into your range of motion. Finish your line.
So is that for both like middle and posterior?
You can do this to all of them. I would be I'd be cautious on the interior. And then to lighten up, you just can come back on with a little fist, a little knuckle, or go back in with your fingers just to kind of make nice to the whole area. Now, the last thing we're gonna do is we're gonna be hooking on in to those cervical attachments right in through here. You can compress into these, rotate the head and the neck a little. With speed, it's actually gonna look like this as we draw on back. Little circles around those transverse processes. Looking right on in to that suboccipital space. And then to finish, we'll hook. You would do your suboccipital treatment right here. Draw back on that head. Scoop underneath the neck, making sure the blade of your hand is right at the that occipital ridge. I usually will compress down a little bit to feel how the spine's aligned, squeeze the neck, and lean away. And this will give you a nice little traction. And you can see I'm pushing the palms of my hands towards one another to get his head to go in a little bit of flexion as I traction. And you might, I think Hope's got a move where she does alternating hands. Personally, I feel a little jumbly and janky when I do that, so I usually will skip that one and just finish with good firm traction. And now it's time for lunch.